Everything I say is full of game, and baby, every move I make is on the level, baby.
Yeah.
Everything I do is so right.
Everything that I do is so groovy, right? It's like my life's a movie with no rewrite. Damn PN bags, shampoo glasses, Hulo on my wrist, got my grown man swag. Used to ride coach, but now I skip on pass. Business select and head straight to first class. This Irish hooligan got moves like Mick Jagger. Everything I get on toe tag and then I bag her.
More time than mad rapper, so dapper, I'm no slacker. I'm in the studio still recording the morning after. I'm so right, so cold and so white. Been smoking the whole night.
I know, right?
Joe Torius, Big Ben, and Jelly Roll. Sparkasian, A-game, we ready, ho. I done did a lot of shit I ain't got credit for, but I'ma still make it happen, you already know.
Everything I say is full of game, and baby, every move I make is on the level, baby. Everything I do is so right.
So right, I used to move that Snow White and make $500 or $600 on a slow night. Yeah, that's when I used to live the club life. But now I stay at home and puff the bud pipe. It's just me and my girlfriend. That's that Nina Ross until the world ends. And I'm gonna be the boss, it's that's your girlfriend. And we gonna ship them off and bring some more in. So all of a sudden I've had the urge to freestyle. Multi on the beat and Jelly Roll the king style. From Nashville to Delaware, John Connor lace it up. I take a kush paper plane to the brain. I see that dope shit y'all working on. It's summertime, let's hit the beach and get our surfing on. I'm ballin' with my jersey on, still reppin' Sparkasian. Until the day that I die, I'm so right, just ask my agent.
Everything I say is full of game, and baby, every move I make is on the level, baby. Everything I do is so right.
Jelly Roll, I'm like a poker player waiting on game night. I told the label, fuck you, spell my name right. It's money out there, I got to get it. And I'm balling out the gym like Austin Rivers. And they love me in the hood cause the streets with me. I said they love me in the hood like a key for cheap. And they love me in the sticks like a big boy truck. Rednecks love me like a 10-point buck. Roll a big joint up, smoke to this. Told more time, Big Ben toast to this. Yeah, if it's money then I'm on board. And the bitches touch me like an iPhone 4. Jelly Roll with a bitch, no brainer. Told her keep this in the mouth like a retainer. Jelly Roll, yeah, I still keep it gangster. Ain't nothing changing. Sorry, thank you.
Everything I say is full of game, and baby, every move I make is on the level, baby. Everything I do is so right.
And there you have it, baby. Straight game. Yeah. Southside, down south to down here. You know, CIMG, Sparkasian, DIMP, A-game. Yeah. Come get some. We're about to go to the casino. You know what this is? We in this thing. Play some blackjack or something. Don't forget the name. Joe Torius, Irish Hooligan 2012.
What's happening, partner? Benton here. Thanks for joining me. This is Pirate Radio for the zombie apocalypse. Indeed, indeed. Mike's a little hot. Let's back off there, sir. As always, or as recently, I think yesterday was show number 11 for our boy OTW News. That's the channel. I myself simulcasted. I don't think I was properly credited for what our audience, again, whose house, our house, for what this audience did for the broadcast over there at OTW News. Added a 20 to 25 until that one lady from Scotland got on there and ran about 10 of us off. Almost ran me off. Y'all remember that from yesterday? Good gracious. Insufferable. One moment, forgot to take two of my the slew of supplements, the daily slew of supplements. How is everybody? I'm going to check in with the chat. Shout out to the chat. And I've been reflecting on uh, me and Mr. O'Shea's dust up from yesterday. Although here in the metaverse, is that even a dust up, right? Oh, and Carl, I tried to do the ganja farmer, just not my style, sir. That was some Arkansas rap and hip hop from 2012. It did have a bit of a weed theme. Happy 420. I used to be a big 420 guy as far as, you know, well, really, it was a 365-day a year ingesting copious amounts of cannabis year round. But I'm trying to be able to pass a drug test. Right there on your screen is my grape, that hilarious grape of mine. What a goofy bastard. Yeah, indeed. That was tough to listen to. Very tough to listen to. Yep. Smoke them if you got them, indeed. Maskless, faceless. Good Lord. Well, I came in with a head of steam yesterday. I do have a page full of notes here, but maybe not quite the head of steam. So I was thinking back to me and O'Shea's dust up, which I think really. Oh yeah, yeah. Cleveland says to be candid, I already ran off and I tuned back in, and she was there, left again. Yeah, something about these older broads where they for whatever reason they tend to become dominant. It's like they have to dominate, and I'm a more considerate person than to just sit on there and just dominate the whole conversation. And that was hilarious when she tried to tell me that, well, we're having a conversation. And it's like, well, not really. It's you talking and we're sitting here listening. I don't know that that's a conversation necessarily. But then again, as always, I will tend to, as much as possible, avoid the conflict in spite of evidence to the contrary. But then I'll come over here and say my piece. That's what I love about our house over here is Benton will go live solo and speak his mind. And I thinking about it, and I did mention when yesterday when OTW, uh, our friendly Canadian there, when we transitioned into the inspirational stories segment, and I did mention something about the David Goggins motivation is crap. And so I sort of gave what I would consider to be my standard disclaimer, and I was trying to diplomatically and and to avoid conflict. But honestly, I don't even really believe in inspiration and inspirational stories. Now I am inspired, but then again, what does that mean, right? Now it's like, oh, we got to go look up what does inspired mean. Inspired definition. Of such surpassing brilliance or excellence as to suggest divine inspiration. Wow, I don't know about all that. Moved or animated by or as by a supernatural influence, affected by divine inspiration. Communicated or given as by supernatural or divine inspiration, having divine authority, hence sacred, holy, oppo- as opposed to uninspired, profane, or secular. Move to a higher level of thought, creativity, or motivation. Yes, I am inspired. Let's stick, yes, or having excellence through inspiration. So I don't know that I have a lot of inspirational stories. I do feel like I have a million stories. And of course, I was exaggerating for effect when I said I had a million inspirational stories. To me, that's an inspirational story. To me, how I perceive that is me or someone else uh, through their force of will and their mental strength, overcoming, adapting, and transcending limitations, circumstances, or obstacles. That's how I would view that. So, I'm, I, and I think we get into some positivity and some touchy feely, And I understand. Here's the thing: is that's where OTW was trying to take the broadcast. So I'm going to play along as much as possible, right? I'm going to do my best to attempt to facilitate what it is that the host is doing, even if I don't agree necessarily with all of the ideas or premises, right? But again, I did start out by saying I consider motivation to be crap, meaning, if I become dependent on something outside of myself, in this case, inspiration, if I cannot act in the world or work on myself or grow and improve or, learn new things or achieve goals without an external stimulus, well, at some point that external stimulus isn't going to be there. Now what? And that's what Goggins means. And again, not into to Goggins. I'm not into these people and personalities. Shout out to Bad Barney No Bullet, by the way. Good to see you in the chat as always. Um, but yeah, I've viewed it that way for a long time. For me, it's all about tapping into my inner reserves. And it's all about those moments when I don't, when I'm not motivated, when I'm not inspired. That's to me that tells the tale, not these moments of inspiration. To me, that's neither here nor there. But maybe it's because I do much of the time exist in that state of inspiration or that space of inspiration. I have to in a lot of ways because I grew up in a wholly WHOLLY negative environment. Everyone, for the most part, I'm speaking in generalities. I do want to address the idea of speaking in generalities, just as a topic. That is one of my notes. Let me check in with the chat before I just go flying off into space here. Thank you very much. Good to see you, Lori Chavez. She agrees with my viewpoint. Good, excellent. Glad to see Sideways Stewie as well. Sideways Stewie. Let's get it right. When the definition uses the word it's trying to define. Exactly. Like, dude, the English language, man. I mean, what even is this? What even is this? Indeed. Gould morning, ghoulish people. Shout out to Ginger Ridge. But yeah, I've years ago I figured out about myself that I was a very negative person. What I mean by negative is negative thought forms, negative expressions, the way I spoke, the way I thought. And when I look back to the environment in which I was socialized as a young person, everyone expressed themselves negatively for the most part. Right. Um, we really, honestly, I had little to no concept of positivity at all. So I've found that in order to at least make it to neutral, I force myself to be more positive. So vis-a-vis, as far as I'm concerned, I am inspired. Now, if someone else finds me inspiring or not, well, that's neither here nor there for me. So yeah, I don't even really believe in this concept of inspirational stories. And I think maybe, I can't speak for O'Shea, but maybe, that's something was clearly bothering him. And I don't believe that it's me. I don't think it's my, you know, personhood that was bothering him. Yeah, there you go. The benefits of sativa. Well, and I would love to be. By the way, I can walk. I'm within walking distance of a recreational dispensary. Now the prices are god awful, of course, but I could when they open at 10 a.m. I could go get in line. It's 4:20. There probably will be a line. I'm assuming. There's only one shop in this little town here in Missouri, but I'm going to be a responsible boy because most likely I will be returning to truck driving in the very near future. Get back on the hamster wheel, as it were. And probably link back up with OTW and simulcast later. Now, let's talk about what really matters. Has anybody been watching this fishtank.live? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? This is Sam Hyde's reality show. And what I find unique about it is that he spent the money to develop his own web-based platform, and he's paying for all of the bandwidth. And I'm telling you, man, if this thing succeeds, meaning it makes money, the entire game is about to change. So I don't think the show has started for today. It's yesterday was day 2. Yeah, I've watched a few clips, Ginger Ridge, although I did go ahead and make an account. I just assumed that this thing costs money, so I completely missed day 1. But then day 2, I was like, well, I'm going to go see how much it costs. It's actually free. You can just make an account for free. But then, of course, there's some things you can add on, that cost money. Oh, is this Paul we're talking about? Lori? I need to go back. Hey, what's up? Always good to see Telescope around these parts. What's happening, partner? Just reading the chat. Bear with me. Oh man. So real quick, I'm going to bring up just so you can see what the interface looks like. I think it's pretty neat, personally. Like I say, I don't believe it started up for the day yet. Although the demand is so high, I've noticed today I've had to refresh the page several times just to be able to get it to work. There we go. Give me a second. We'll share this screen. Maybe. Oh, numbers are dropping. Get it together, host. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, as you can see, nothing's happening yet. But you got the live chat on the right side of the screen. Now that you can only chat if you pay for the $40 a season, for the season pass. Now, initially they opened it up to everybody, but it would just scroll by so fast you couldn't even read any of it. What's up? Always good to see Big L around here. Shout out to you, sir. This is Fish Tank, by the way. This is Sam Hyde's reality TV show. It hasn't started up yet for the day. But as you can see, there's these different cameras that you can scroll through. I think this is going to be a big deal. And in fact, if you guys, there's a famous YouTuber that Imp Lemon, if you guys are familiar with him, on his blogging channel, his sub channel, he was saying that this is going to be like the next big thing. Scroll through these cameras. It hasn't started yet. And you can see the contestants, all the different contestants, buy merch and such. Yeah, I really do think this is going to be a game changer, especially if it makes money. So check that out if you're so inclined. I'll be watching today, later this evening anyway. Let's go ahead and stop the screen here. Anything y'all want to get into? I noticed JFK Beta on his channel, he's got a conversation with Provo Kid, so we may pop in on a little bit of that, see what's going on. Now, EBT simulcasted a couple of hours. Apparently, EBT was on Paul's live stream last night. So I woke up this morning. Oh, goody, looky there. There's an EBT live stream. And the bozo privated it before I could download it. I mean, what even is this? Now I've got to go search through an 11, almost 12-hour live stream. What are you doing, EBT? I don't get it. What's the point? Pipe up, fat slave, as Paul might say. But yeah, the way I view it is, as far as an inspirational story, I mean, I think I am the inspirational story, but to myself. I could brag about, what I've accomplished, right? But there's a reason why there's exactly one deep South white boy born on the bayou, edge of the Mississippi River Delta, talking to you guys the way I talk. You guys and gals, rather. Please forgive me. Addressing these various topics and, philosophies and psychology, just the gamut of topics that we cover over here. Right. And I think there's been some confusion because I was speaking generally. And I think when I said this on Dick's broadcast, Freedom Grower, I think it got construed into, oh, he's saying that he's the only person born into his circumstances and then he's overcome them. No, I'm saying generally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people were born into very similar circumstances such as my own. And as far as I can tell, I'm the only one who came up out of it spiritually. And especially with being in the metaverse, interfacing with people in these ways, and it is kind of bizarre in a lot of ways, to me personally. But there's a reason for that, right? So to me, that's the inspiration. Now, if somebody else sees that and is inspired, good for them. I mean, I don't even really believe in this idea of inspiration. So maybe O'Shea doesn't either, and maybe that's what got him so cranky and agitated. And I was trying to go with what the attempting to go through with what the host was putting forth, which I think I do feel is my obligation to some extent. Like when I go on Paul's panels, I don't really want to talk about the current events. I definitely don't want to watch Fox News videos, but again, I feel obliged to attempt to facilitate what the host is trying to do, right? Well, and I don't even know that it's exceptionalism, Carl. It's go meet the people where I'm from. I mean, this is not a high bar to clear, Carl. The fact that I'm the only one who seemingly has managed to do it, at least in this manner, that I think that says a lot about the state of the people in general, right? To me, it's not even that big of a deal. It's only in comparison to these bozos, that's where it gets. Yeah, born on a bayou. In fact, the world's longest bayou runs through my hometown, Bayou Bartholomew. Indeed. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the current events segment either. For some reason, Paul has typecast me as I heard him. He said to me something about that I was like Tribe, which maybe we have some similarities personality wise. I have no idea, but I'm not into the. I used to be very much into the current events and the news, so probably that's what Paul's picking up on. But Drew, shout out to Drew World Order, Chalk Body Outline. And Drew was on here yesterday, and me and Drew may very well be launching a daily show or a Monday through Friday show, perhaps. Not quite sure how that's going to manifest yet, but a possibility. Well, thank you, Rob. But I am definitely inclined towards news. I do, but just things have gotten so ridiculous, and I glance at the headlines regularly, but that whole Chinese balloon thing, I'm out. I'm out. It's just too ridiculous. I'm out. Well, thanks, Rob. I'm more talking about just actually like what we would bring to the broadcast from Paul's perspective. So eventually, I think Paul will realize I'm really more into the. I don't know. It doesn't even matter. I don't really know Tribe, so I don't want to turn it into a me versus him. I just mean I'm not trying to show up for current news segments. That's all I'm saying. But if I'm there and that's the way the broadcast goes, I will do my best. That's all I can say. And look, Talcott was on there last night or yesterday afternoon when I was on there, and Lord knows I want to just piece him up again like I've done before. But I was like, well, might as well facilitate. Hey, there you go. Thank you very much, Lori. Much appreciated. Yeah. Well, again, I'm talking from Paul's perspective as the broadcast he's running and where can Benton fit into that. So, obviously, not obviously, but I'm assuming that necessarily that would be adjusted over time if I'm even able to contribute. Insert standard whining and crying about the state of my health here, by the way. Of course it did. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's part of why I left, in part. Now, I did have other things I needed to do as well. But yeah, let's try not to make it too much about me, right? Don't want to turn this into a cult of personality. Although that's a good thing about Drew. He'll never let it go there with the cult of personality. And then, yeah, and generally, I wanted to talk about this. I've noticed this aversion to blanket statements and generalizations. And then something else I've talked about in the past is that an aphorism that I've never heard anybody but myself say. So I'm pretty sure I came up with this. Maybe I did not come up with the concept or discover. I mean, these things are floating out in the ether, I would suppose. And then, some of us, all of us really are able to tap into them in various ways. But this idea I've talked about for a while now, that correct philosophy is the absence of incorrect philosophy. So I would say that this aversion to blanket statements and generalizations, that is incorrect philosophy. Well, why? Because my brain can apprehend the nuance. I can take in a blanket statement or a generalization, and my brain can fill in all the gaps of the times that it doesn't occur, the times that it doesn't apply. Again, there are always exceptions to everything. Even that statement, by the way. There's even exceptions to the statement. There are always exceptions to everything. So I build that into my thought process. That's built in for me. That's one of my starting places. So why wouldn't I go out and say blanket statements and make generalizations? And I believe that is part of the lefty communist programming. especially if you go back to the Saul Alinsky rules for radicals. The enemy, if we consider the commies and the lefties to be the enemy, they run around making generalizations and blanket statements. I mean, if you think you're going to live like a traditional person, whatever that means, and be, so-called conservative, whatever that means, just in general, you're dismissed by them. You're mocked, you're ridiculed, in general. But those are the people who will attack and say, "Oh, you can't make blanket statements," while they themselves make blanket statements. There's absolutely nothing inherently wrong with generalizations and blanket statements. But I've heard numerous people in this metaverse, in these so-called truth communities, just immediately say, "Well, that's a generalization. You're not supposed to make generalizations." Who said? Says who? Who made that rule? Who's here to limit me and my humanity by telling me that I can't use a blanket statement or a generalization? Indeed, Carl, Yuri Bezmenov laid out the way. You are correct, sir. Thank you, Mr. Me. Much appreciated. He says it becomes part of your base thinking process. Now, I guess part of my problem is that I just assume that other folks have figured that out or have that built in. But this just outright rejection of generalized and blanket statements or so-called speaking in absolutes. It's a bunch of nonsense as far as I'm concerned. But whenever somebody says it on a panel, I'm not necessarily going to feel like I need to settle their hash. I think this is where some people get a little confused with you truly. It takes a lot for me to become so annoyed that now I'm going to have to feel like I got to correct somebody at the level of general when they say, "Oh, you can't generalize" or whatever. I'll just come over here and complain. I don't feel like I need to do that on the panel. Yeah, YouTube's up to some shenanigans. Yeah, YouTube hates. Lori says YouTube hates me. YouTube hides people from me. I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. What's Rob up to? Rob, you blocking people? That's your right, I suppose. Actually, I thought you meant moose for some reason. I read my brain made that mistake. I have no idea. In regards to not seeing people's comments, shout out to Slow Boy Whiteboard, by the way. In regards to not seeing people's comments, go to the upper right-hand corner. There is a slide bar icon. Change it from top chat to all messages. Indeed. Why YouTube doesn't make that in the settings somewhere? Why can't I make a setting that defaults to all messages? Very strange. But yes, sometimes I forget to do that myself. Oh, okay. Well, do what you got to do, Rob. It's none of my business ultimately. Oh, and arrogance, just generalized arrogance. And I do think maybe that's also part of O'Shea's reaction to me is just my base level of arrogance. So I got to thinking about arrogance, and so of course I started with the definition of arrogance. But we won't even read that. I think we all understand what arrogance means, hopefully. And I did a Google image search. So we came up with some of these what do they call this thing? One of these I know it's a meme, I guess, but there's probably a more specific. Let me show you what I'm talking about. One of these things. It's just like a picture with a quote on it. But yeah, Nietzsche apparently said arrogance on the part of the meritorious is even more offensive to us than the arrogance of those without merit, for merit itself is offensive. Exactly. So I've actually gone out here and done and accomplished some things in life, as mundane and trite and banal as they may actually be compared to others, right? But it's still things that I found difficult to accomplish. And, it certainly involved a lot of overcoming of obstacles. I overcame my obstacles, and yeah, for merit itself is offensive. And that's the crabs in a bucket. Isn't that what that is? The crabs in a bucket phenomenon? And I'm feeling quite unwell at the moment, just so you know. So please bear with me if I'm not quite as energetic and focused as I was yesterday. And Slow Boy Whiteboard says he's got 20 gallons of dirty motor oil. He's got to pour in smaller containers. I'll be listening. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. Yeah, I'm also a fan of the audio form, I must say. Yeah. Mustache birthday boy really soiled Nietzsche's memory. Yeah, I don't know. Americans may not even know enough about that to I got to do more research, Carl. People mistake arrogance for confidence quite often. Yeah, and it's possible to have both. And one of these memes, it seemed to be it was like arrogance or confidence. I'm like, well, it could be both, right? It's not one or the other, I'm pretty sure. But then I got to thinking, well, what if one's personality itself is arrogant? And which got me to thinking about something I've wanted to cover here. Well, actually, this is what got me thinking about what I've been wanting to cover recently, which is astrology. So I saw this. Also, it's a lion. Okay, well, Leo, of course. And this says arrogance, the best leaders inspire by example. When that's not an option, brute intimidation works pretty well too. Well, really, it doesn't, but I know they're trying to be cheeky here. I don't know, Rob. I can't keep up with who's got what between their legs, honestly. Don't know. He said, I thought Slow Boy was a chick. Hard to say. Hard to say. In the old days, everybody was a male until definitively proven otherwise. But, I mean, who even knows these days? We're going to keep it to about an hour, by the way, unless Drew comes in again like he did yesterday. So, approximately, we got about 30 minutes left here. Yeah, lions are confident they can eat you. Exactly. Music holds a secret. Exactly. So that got me to thinking about astrology. And I said, I bet you, one of these astrology sites, I bet if I Google most arrogant astrological signs, I bet you somebody's written an article about that. Oh, before we move on to that, though, I like this one. This is, I enjoyed this one, although we're going to have to zoom in, aren't we? Zoom in, sir. And I am a cat person, just in case anybody's unclear about that. Arrogance. When you're better than others, it's best to let them know in no uncertain terms so that they won't embarrass themselves by questioning your decisions and actions. Yeah, indeed. It's just that's more cute than apropos, I guess, or applicable. I don't even know what I'm trying to say at this point. But yeah, so I'm thinking, I bet you if I Google this, there's got to be a most arrogant zodiac signs. So we get to, yes, indeed, there is the most arrogant zodiac signs in astrology ranked from most to least. And just like those times anytime on the internet or on a YouTube video, if the theme is the worst cities in Arkansas, to be from my hometown of Pine Bluff, to be from Pine Bluff is to know without any uncertainty that Pine Bluff will in fact be ranked number one worst city. So to be a Leo is to know that without 100% of the time, Leo will be the most arrogant sign as we scroll down. And yes, in fact, we see number one, Leo, and yours truly has sun in Leo. And we will talk about enough astrology to realize that the sun sign clearly doesn't tell the entire tale. Yes, and it says, well, it's no surprise that Leos are at the top of the list. Sure, they're full of themselves, self-absorbed, and sometimes downright conceited, but it's usually justified. If they were not the charismatic beings they are, they wouldn't have so many followers, friends, and supporters. Leo's ego is so big, and I think this is what we're running into with O'Shea. Leo's ego is so big that it can actually cause bumps in the road of their success, although not that I'm trying to get anywhere through O'Shea. Once they've got an idea in their head, it's hard to get them to change their mind. They think they're right about everything. That's an interesting statement. They think they're right about everything. And I'm certainly that way to some extent. The biggest factor that makes them so full of themselves is their arrogance. They don't just think they're all that, they know it. But then we go down to what is actually, I have more Virgo in my chart than I do Leo. Virgo's number 6, but there's only 12, so I guess that's middle of the pack. But it does say something about Virgos are know-it-alls. So I got a double dose of the old know-it-all there, which, believe it or not, I do a lot of work to minimize that. and I really do. I minimize it as much as I'm able to because I know I come across as a know-it-all. Fully aware of that. Not always a good thing. Thank you, Lori. And I have noticed one thing about Leo. It's a lot different for ladies than males. A female Leo, in my experience, that manifests a lot differently. But one thing I've noticed, if I spend time around a male Leo, they will always do or say something, and I'll be like, "That's a Leo," and I'm never wrong, ever, never, ever, ever, never. But I can't guess anybody else's sun sign. I have no ability to do that. Yeah, there you go. 99% of people with toxoplasmosis don't even know they have it. Well, yeah, and that's the cat thing, right? The cat poop, indeed. Well, and you may have heard me say this before. I love cats and I don't like litter boxes. And in fact, it was my first wife. I never would have had a cat, but I do like cats who, of course, like a little girl, she said, talk me into getting a cat. And I said, well, I love cats. I hate litter boxes. And I don't want any pet that poops in my house ultimately. But of course she's like, "Oh, I'll clean it." And then that just turned into that turned into a contest of just who could um tolerate the disgusting litter box the longest, and she won that contest. So that meant yours truly was the one who cleaned it most of the time. Capricorn, Lori Chavez. Yeah, and I want to do more astrology content over here. I find it interesting. And in fact, when OTW in the live chat over there at OTW News were getting into Moose's personality, I said, "Listen, man, it's time to we need to just do a birth chart analysis of this guy. We got to get in there, man." I think if Moose studied his chart, which he may have, I don't know, but if he did, it would certainly help. Uh, Ex-wife number one, by the way, Sun in Capricorn. I've always gotten along with Capricorns for the most part, although they can be very stubborn and bullheaded, as we all know. Which, by the way, is not always a bad thing, and those type of people don't generally bother me at all. Um, I don't have a problem with it. But I know, number 1, uh, she was quite stubborn. I couldn't necessarily just, impose my will on her across the board like I can with some folks. Personalities. Yeah, there you go. Well, and that's the thing is, I will say this, and by the way, show me a human and I'll show you a hypocrite, and I've said before, I'm not into people and personalities. Which is true to an extent. I'm interested in the part where an individual person can use tools like astrology to really sort of delve into their own personality and discover just what the fuck is going on in there. And another thing I like about astrology, if I'm looking at my birth chart, is a lot of these things that seem like drawbacks. Well, if I've actually put in a lot of work on myself and I've overcome that detriment, you know, then well, that's neither here nor there, right? Yeah, there you go. Birth chart exams of YouTube personalities. Well, and there's I think it's astrotheme.com has a birth charts of a lot of famous people and then like a searchable database, which is interesting. So like this Tim Tebow, if you guys remember when he was, in the news all the time for a couple of years, you can actually search their database and he has the highest uh, fire element in his chart of anybody in sports, any famous person in sports. It's crazy because I'm not even fire dominant actually in my chart. I'm earth dominant, thankfully. It's probably a good thing. Yeah, we know music holds a secret. We love our Aries around here. By the way, Sam Hyde also in Aries, and EBT, which I think once I figured out that he had Sun in Aries, that helped me understand him better for sure. Yeah, you're better off not fucking with the Aries at all. Just don't even go up against them. Just let them have their way or get the fuck away from them. Yep, Cleveland, Aquarius. That's the complementary sign to Leo, by the way. Yep, Aquarius Sun. And that is an air sign, I believe. I used to have all this memorized. Yeah, toilet train the cats. Yeah, we weren't quite evolved enough to be involved in that at the time. But yeah, that would be the way to go, right? Or if one had their own property, I guess they could just let the cats run around outside. So now I'm starting to wonder, where do these fish tank people sleep? Or I guess they probably just turn the cameras off at nighttime, I'm guessing. If I knew how to make a poll, I would like to know how many people here like know how to get their birth chart and, for free online, and how many have actually like looked into it versus how many haven't. That would be interesting, I think. I would think it's probably about 50%. 50%. Cats creep you out. Yeah, cats are creepy at times. That's certainly true. Yep. And apparently if you die, they'll eat you, from what I understand. Well, I'm going to take a look at some of this JFK beta with Provo Kid, if you don't mind. If they don't hold our interest, we'll abort the mission. But I was saving this for the live stream. This is called Outrage Society: A Conversation and Analysis.
Rolling. So let me start off. Dude, I really appreciate the care package you sent a couple, maybe a week or so ago. It was really sweet.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It inspired me to put another one together, and I just sent another package out last week. But it's always fun putting those together, and just takes me back to kind of the feeling of getting like a card in the mail from grandma or something unexpected. And I'm glad you liked it. I had fun putting it together. So
Yeah. I seen that you're sending out another one, so I'm excited that maybe this is, who knows how long, but that it rekindled it and for you to do it.
absolutely, it's fun. And it's a good way to, I think, kind of connecting to the book, or the idea of like a digital off ramp, right? Like in the recent package I sent, I had 2 books, and one of them is a book it's a bird watching book, right? And so this gentleman lives in nature, and I think that's like one way to get off the digital off ramp is you can take a book and learn a lot about nature and things around you. So I was keeping in tone with the book and everything. There's I think a real need to kind of get people on the digital off ramp, so to speak.
Yeah, I dig it. I like that idea too, where you're having like this online interaction with someone, and then you physically send them a package. I mean, I'm just kind of saying it out loud, but you physically send them a package, and then in that there's like a prompt. There's like, hey, maybe you should consider going outside and checking out these birds. So it's like, tying the physical and the digital together. I think that's pretty cool. It makes me think of like alternate reality games.
Well, and if I'm going to be critical, and of course I am, because I am very critical by nature, and I know JFK Beta is a fan of some of my rants, so I want to be a little careful. But I'm not exactly sure what you guys are talking about at this point. Yeah, exactly. Provo Kid equals provoked. So I can tell that both of these guys are abstract thinkers. I mean, that would be my opinion anyway. I have no way of knowing that for sure, but the ability to sort of be a little more focused. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. That's just my impression listening to this. That's really the only thing I want to say. Other than that, I don't have any criticisms. Oh, other than Provo Kid being a communist, but we've covered that in the past, so that's water under the bridge at this point.
And how you can start to tie certain ideas into a larger reality. Yeah.
Certainly. And one aspect too was like getting into nature was like I put, what are they called, buckeyes, right? So things to plant too, and to watch something grow, to check up on, and to keep a routine to it. But what were you? Can you extrapolate a little bit more into what were you saying with the alternative reality?
Yeah, the little bit that I know is the first one that comes to mind, I think, is something they did for either Pacific Rim or The Dark Knight a couple years ago, where they create a website. It's like you create intrigue and ways of interacting in this physical reality, but it's also through like digital media and fictional media that you might be like, it might be the Joker. It has a bunch of little, or the Riddler in that whole universe might have a bunch of different.
So I'm going to blame my illness. I can't figure out what they're talking about. Now I feel like a dick because JFK Beta has been very nice, but let's just jump in the middle. Maybe we can figure out what's going on.
You go anywhere. It's inescapable, right? The airports, I mean, the gyms have all the screens too.
Right. You might want to just be there in your body, but right above your treadmill, or like at Planet Fitness when I first started working out, I saw a line of television flat screens. It's like, I mean, I don't think you can avoid it anymore. I think the screens are here.
Absolutely. What quote do you want to go to next, or is this? you
I was kind of we're having like so many nice conversations, so I was just gonna kind of maybe see if I could go to what is I'm just trying to believe I can't. Okay, maybe this one. Rage is the heroic medium of action. On this score, rage is fundamentally different from anger. The effect of waves of that rage. Digital outrage cannot be sung. Oh, this is what you're talking about. Admits neither action nor narration. Instead, it is an affective condition, devoid of the power to act. And then I said, rage doesn't just create an affect in people. Oh no, I think he says this. It stirs them into action. And then
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point about rage stirring people to action. And in fact, that was my major fuel in the past for, self advancement or, goals I wanted to achieve or, when I was, because I did used to train physically, very intensely for many years. Um, I've done a lot of hard, difficult, arduous things physically. Uh, and then, thrusting myself into homelessness intentionally and all of this. Um, I certainly was able to use wrath and rage, as my fuel for that. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but if the rage is there, might as well, and isn't that alchemy, by the way? Isn't that a transmutation? You know, taking energy that exists in one form and then, transferring it or changing it or transforming it into another form. I think it is. Wouldn't that be some sort of alchemical process? Especially, since I've come to understand that a lot of this stuff is physiological, especially, people who talk about anxiety, um, racing thoughts, things of this nature. And at a certain point, just through my practice of meditation, I had a long standing, and in fact, I practice meditation every day. Because I know somebody mentioned on OTW's show yesterday, I think it was that Cage guy. He said something about, the autonomic nervous system and how you're typically speaking, one is not aware of their breath. I'm aware of my breath a lot of the time. I would say in a given day, I'm aware of my breath more of the time than I'm not. And to me, that's, I think that's sort of a side effect of all of the meditation I've done, the practice of meditation. Um, so as part of that, I was able to realize that, okay, and here was also a side effect of the meditation is, I used to have a lot of trouble falling asleep, especially back in my normie days, and that was due to the racing thoughts, right? Trying to go to sleep, but my mind is bothering me with all of these intrusive thoughts, and then you get the emotional attachment of, maybe a bill is due or, maybe there's some sort of conflict at work, just all of these things that we all, life circumstances, right, that we all get involved with. And after some time, that never happens to me anymore. I don't ever have that as I'm going to sleep. But sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I get the racing thoughts. And then I've realized through the meditation and the observations that, well, later on in the day, if I then turn my attention to the exact same thoughts, I don't experience the same visceral reaction at the level of my physiology, the heart rate, just that uncomfortable, anxious feeling. And then I can put the events themselves in proper context. I'm like, okay, well, actually, you know, when I woke up this morning and was experiencing this anxiety, which in generally speaking, I do not experience a lot of anxiety, in my normal daily life. But so, well, okay. Then I realized if it's only ever happening some of the time when I very first wake up in the morning, like, it has to be physiological. Like, how could it not be? And I even told this to my mom years ago, and she did not like this, and she rejected it out of hand. But then when I visited my mother a few days ago, that's what she told me, because she had surgery on her thyroid or her parathyroid or whatever it is recently. And she said, yeah, because my mom would have a lot of anxiety around driving, especially if she wasn't the one driving the vehicle. And she said, yeah, she said her anxiety is much better since she had her surgery. She said, yeah, me and, her current husband or her husband, not my dad though. They went on some road trip, and she said, yeah, I wasn't bothered at all by it. And now see, here's where I resisted the urge to say, well, yeah, I told you that years ago that this was physiological, your this stress response and this anxiety. This is your physiology creates it. And this is what I realize is that the body's the physiological state, the brain then generates thoughts that match the physiology, right? And by the way, you're free to accept or reject this idea, but we can, it's up to somebody to determine if they want to believe the studies or not. But according to my research, studies have shown that a person, just by making themselves adopt a confident, body language, stand up straight, take up more space, just a stereotypically more confident posture, they then feel more confident, or they report that they feel more confident anyway. But you can pick apart the studies and say, well, it wasn't, it's up to everybody to do their own research and to decide. I myself was convinced, and it seems true, right? That seems true. So why wouldn't it be the same with something like anxiety? Now, there can be, to me, obviously there can be certain circumstances that are so, that are so heavy that of course they cause stress and anxiety. But I just mean in somebody's normal daily life, all of this anxiety, so much so that many people are going to the mental health system to become medicated, right? Um, and so part of my practice of meditation is, if I wake up in the morning and I start having these racing thoughts, and then here's the physiological, and I know it's a physiological basis, it seems like I'm about 50-50 on whether or not I can just sort of meditate my way through that. And then you get into things like cortisol and hormones. And, you know, my limited understanding of this is that, that's some sort of spike in the cortisol, or maybe it's a drop in the cortisol. And if you look at this Wim Hof, with the breathing and the cold immersion, he is somewhat proven that a person can, through the power of their mind, control their physiology to some degree, with respect to these hormones and the immune system and um, the immune response and such. So I found that to be true, although I'm not able to practice it 100%. Why? Because I'm not a Zen Buddhist, right? Um, and again, correct philosophy is the absence of incorrect philosophy. To me, that's an incorrect philosophy to sort of be like, well, what would a Zen Buddhist be like? And then try to like, inflict that idea on myself or others. I noticed, especially the internet seems to have this idea that an individual person, like maybe a Kim before the storm, who, does control himself very well overall, but then there's moments where he sort of loses control and, gets off of, he's not as centered as he otherwise would be. But this idea that we can just all access, like we have moment by moment access to this Zen Buddhism, it's like, well, yeah, but there's a reason why these guys grow up, as Buddhists, by the way, and grow up meditating from a young age, and then, eventually reach some sort of mastery of Zen Buddhism, as far as being able to practice it and just to have more or less total control of what, of themselves, right? Like, I think we meaning the masses of people in the United States and even the so-called truth community, like, are those people really anywhere near being able to practice Zen Buddhism? Like, I don't think so. Um, and I've done a lot of work on being able to control myself and in being able to stay centered. And you see how I get sometimes. Like, it doesn't take much. But sitting there listening to that lady yesterday, Mon L or whatever her name was. And by the way, I don't hold a grudge, generally speaking, although there's some exceptions to that, of course. But, um, I knew at some point something would occur and I would just unleash the beast, as it were. But, now we get back to something I talked about recently. And I know JFK Beta had made a snippet of one of my rants talking about this, the demonic spirit of wrath. And I had speculated that perhaps that was the last demonic entity, if one believes in those, if one is willing to entertain such a notion, the idea that may be the last one for me to receive deliverance from. So I was able to stay out of the space of wrath, so maybe I have been delivered, although I'm not sure. And I'm thinking maybe it's just that entity knows to remain dormant, to lie dormant, because it knows every time it shows itself, that I'm just immediately going to be like, all right, I see you there, demon of wrath. And now that it's exposed itself, it may very well get kicked the fuck out, evicted from what it considers its home, by the way, especially if we look at the Bible, with the idea of the disembodied spirit walking in the dry place, seeking rest and finding none. And then, that had been where the energy sphere that demonic entity was inhabiting through the legalese of the human being, had engaged in these incorrect actions over time, such that the entity could make a legal claim to say, well, based on this person's behavior, I get to go into that energy sphere. More or less, this person is voted for this level of energy, right? And so then the person had repented and cleaned up their life, and then the demonic spirit was ejected, against its will. And so after wandering in the dry place, seeking rest and finding none, it said in the Bible, the biblical story, oh, I think I'll go back to my home, meaning the energy sphere of the man. Went back, found its house, in quotes, house, cleaned up and well swept, had been, meaning the man had turned his life around and was doing right, but had presumably begun engaging in the incorrect actions again because the spirit was able to enter back in, and then 7 more came with it, each more wicked than the last, such that the final state of the man was worse than where he started. And to me, that's all real stuff, whether or not, and I don't believe the Bible to be literal either. That's me and OTW. We almost got into the Jesus thing, but I did prefer to save it for a different time. And that wasn't yesterday, that was a few days ago, but we probably will agree on a lot of things with respect to the Bible. But me, myself, I've found a lot of truth in some of these stories, and that's one of the ones that's really resonated with me over time. And demons and demonology, certainly something that I've delved into a great deal, both in my personal experience and in things I've read, and in many of my observances, and also, and I've talked about this before, it's my belief. Actually, it's my knowing. Shout out to Paul for clarifying the difference between a belief and a knowing. Um, I know that I have absolutely, well, I know that wisdom, and he has a different view of wisdom, Paul does. This is somewhere we might eventually disagree. I think wisdom cannot be attained. I think it's bestowed or granted. But that's more of an opinion, really. That's my view of wisdom. And I had experiences where I know that if we want to call it the Most High, the Creator, whatever that is, that I was led to have specific experiences in the realm of demons and demonology, and was taught specific lessons. And to me, that represents being granted or bestowed wisdom that I don't really see in other people. And by the way, things I don't think I would have figured out on my own, because I'm really not that fucking smart overall when it comes to things like that. In the major one, that the major wisdom bestowed on me was this idea of person A using person B for person A's own gratification. And I don't mean sexually, although that could manifest sexually. And then we get back into this when I've talked about that I finally chose to face the reality that based on my actions, I was a bad person at a certain time. And then I talked about that I immediately realized, well, okay, now I have the power to choose through my free will, and by implementing my will and by controlling my lower urges, to actually do enough good actions over time to create a good person. Because if I'm a bad person, if back then, if that was a true statement that I had become a bad person, well, in fact, I was creating a bad person. Because like I've talked about, we're all endowed, if we're willing to accept that we're created in the image and likeness of the Most High or the Creator, that means we're also creators. We're endowed with free will and creative ability. And in fact, it's my assertion that our creative ability never lies dormant. That means in each new moment, we are actually bringing something new into being, such that I was actually continuing to create a so-called bad person, meaning, okay, well, I obviously then, if I'm willing to accept all of that, obviously I have the power to, over time, create a good person. Now we can get into what's a bad person, what's a good person. Yeah, that's all. Those are all discussions that can be had. For the purposes of this discourse, I'll just assume that the listener understands my meaning, even though we are speaking the English language, which is very confusing and fraught with peril. Which brings me back to the situation with attempting to register my car, which is becoming a very convoluted and annoying and difficult process. But I'll put a pin in that and come back to it. But some of that comes back to just how confusing English is, and that I purchased the car from someone who's only been in the country for about 3 years and doesn't really communicate that well in English. Let me check in with the chat. I feel like that was some pretty good cooking, as Provo Kid might say. Well, Slow Boy, I would say I would be inclined to agree with what you're saying here. He said, "No man is good. No, not one." I would say that left to his own devices, I would say that's true, and certainly the masses that seems to be the case. But I am asserting that where I was at when I realized I was a bad person, although I took it for granted, in my mind, well, of course I'm a good person. That was just neither here nor there, because I could certainly rationalize and point to many reasons why I was in fact a good person, but I wasn't. And well, let me finish up the thing about person A using person B for person A's most own gratification. So I realized that was in fact one of the major ways in which I had created a bad person, was that I would frequently use other people to gratify myself. And a lot of that is by feeding my own ego, right? And again, it's not necessarily sexually, although it could be sexually. Thankfully, in my case, it did not manifest in that regard for the most part. I'm sure there were times that it did. Thankfully, I never, committed any crimes against anybody. But certainly in some of my romantic relationships, I would say that it's possible. I'm always going to err on the side of saying it's possible. Overall, thankfully that's not my weakness, as it does seem to be with Mr. O'Shea, who doesn't seem to like it when I point out that he always brings us down into the lower chakras, which is demonic, by the way. And I'm not saying Brian, I don't believe that a human being can be possessed necessarily. But I'm talking about demonic oppression. I think he's under some form of demonic oppression with respect to this sexual stuff. And if you notice O'Shea, if you talk to him for more than a few minutes, he's going to take it to the sexual realm. And I do want to address some of the stuff that gets directed at me by Mr. O'Shea and a few others. I want to get into that. And I do appreciate EBT for pointing out that gay, so-called gay, which really what we're talking about is the same-sex attraction. I mean, it's really what we're talking about, that's an activity. So by that definition, no, that word does not apply to me, right? Because I'm not engaged in those activities. In fact, I'm engaged in no such activity. And a benefit, a side effect of my illness is my sex drive's basically gone. And I've always, dude, mine's been way too fucking high for much of my life. And, I don't miss it, to be honest with you. I have very few sexual thoughts, but I can recall years past. I can remember, and that's why I get a kick out of this idea of men going their own way. The MGTOW. Dude, that would have never even been an option for me. So if intellectually, if I was 26 and somebody convinced me that this was the right way to live, I had no ability to go my own way because my sex drive was too high. This is a non-starter, man. That didn't really start wearing off till I was probably my late 30s, and even then it was strong. I'd say it was by my late 30s where I realized, okay, I can actually, think about things other than sex. It was just completely just an obsession, and I think men are that way to some extent. And I do think that the higher levels of male hormone that an individual man, that his physiology, again, we're back to the physiology, the higher those levels that the man produces, I think they're going to, again, the thoughts, we tend to, I think we have it backwards sometimes. We tend to think, oh, it's the thoughts creating, the physiology. I think it's backwards. I think the physiology, then the mind, the physiology is where it is, and then the mind, fills it in with the thoughts. Yeah, there you go. Toilet bowl earth. Men gang their own way. Oh man. Indeed, sir. Indeed. Yeah, Slow Boy Whiteboard says men don't start developing their mind until their sex drive dissipates later in life. Although what we're seeing with these chemical attacks, I think, is a lot of these younger males, I'm not sure, do they even have a high sex drive? Or, and I know Paul talks about this a lot, is it just the fact that everybody's got pornography in their pocket nowadays? Is that really subverting so much of their drive? Maybe it is. And it's a bit tongue in cheek, but I've said for years that, you know, we all got here, in part because of some man somewhere had a very strong desire, for a specific female like that, and I've also joked about that, men have to, because women like to say, oh, men are dogs, and sort of make fun of us for being preoccupied with sex. But the fact is, we have to have that to overcome how annoying women can be, and I'm not trying to offend the ladies. It's just, and again, I'm an actual misanthrope. I mean, my base emotional state is annoyance. Almost everything annoys me. So, take that for what it's worth. Yeah. There you go. Toilet bowl earth. Another side effect of my illness is that, dude, I'm really running out of the fucking vitriol and the energy. Like, I really don't have the energy to get into it with you. So I don't know, man. Things have changed quite a bit, I suppose. And my time here is almost done anyway. So I can't say that I'm not looking forward to it on some level. Uh, yeah, there you go. Good to see Mr. O'Shea, as much as we may or may not get along at any given time. And thank you to Music Holds a Secret for posting Mr. O'Shea's link. Just catching up on the chat here. Indeed, Quantum Epic. Yeah, very annoying. Well, Jimbo, it's not that I have no pain. I mean, I think all of us are in some level of physical pain on a daily basis, right? I mean, isn't that just part of the suffering that's going on here? So I will tell you, I have varying degrees of pain in my upper right shoulder area, and that's from my gallbladder, which may very well heal. I'm not sure. It's healing over time. Mm. And in fact, that's not even my major issue. But here's where I'm at with pain, Jimbo, is that I kind of like it. Part of me enjoys things that are difficult or arduous. I'm one of those pain don't hurt people. Now I don't like it. I'm like everybody else. It's that to me, the anticipation of pain is worse than the pain itself, though. Like, once it's happening, I found an ability to deal with it pretty effectively through my force of will. Right. Now, the reason why I don't have much abdominal pain is because with the chronic pancreatitis, the pain from that is caused by people eating bad foods. So I don't ever eat bad foods ever. I never, ever, ever say, I really want a Snicker bar, but I know the Snicker bar is going to literally make me incapacitate me for 2 days and I'll be in horrific pain. See, some people still eat the candy bar, even knowing what the candy bar is going to do to them, because they have little to no control of their urges, right? So I just don't eat the candy bar. I don't eat the slice of pizza. I can't even go to a restaurant and eat the same foods I eat on a daily basis, because if they prepare them with like a vegetable oil, same thing, right? So that's where we're at on the pain. And I am one of those pain don't hurt people. But I'll tell you right now, I've got more or less a permanent pain in my right shoulder, and it's been there for years. And then I also, in that same region, see, this is where I think the spiritual and the emotional and the trauma, when we talk about PTSD and trauma, and then I've been talking about physiology so much, it all ties in my experience. So, especially when I first started the meditation practice, I became aware of a lot of tension in my upper shoulders, my upper back and my shoulders. And then over time, I was able to focus my will and to really go into those areas energetically and to figure out, okay, what's going on in here. And I detected it as a lot of just this low level stagnated energies, right? That I was holding on to. Well, that's what PTSD is, right? Or trauma. This is this low level energy that had stagnated within my energy sphere. Now, over time, you know, I've gone through and experienced enough of that to release a lot of that trauma from my energy sphere and from my physical body, so that I don't have near the level of pain, in that region. And in fact, that pain did extend to my all the way down into my gallbladder region, my lower, my lower right abdominal region. And that's where I think we get to this talking about this demon of wrath. I do believe that does seem to be the area of my energy sphere that it seems to either inhabit now, or certainly it had inhabited in the past. And so this is what I'm talking about with a lot of this, so-called self-realization, introspection, self-work is, you know, each of us can do these things. It's very painful, it's very arduous. It's certainly, I would find it, for me as a person, I would find it difficult to impossible to do these things while also living a normal life of living in a house or an apartment, earning a living, having a spouse, having, friends and family. In order to accomplish what I'm speaking on, I found it necessary to literally go live in the streets for damn near an entire decade, but and off and on for much of 10 years, and in fact 6 years consecutively, just living urban camping, living in the streets, right? Um, but not off in the wilderness. People have this idea when I'm talking about this that, oh, he must have been off in the wilderness somewhere. No, I was in urban areas, but oftentimes an urban area or a suburban area, but there's patches of woods. I'm from the South, especially. There's patches of woods everywhere, you know. And in fact, if you look at almost every Walmart supercenter that's not in an actual city, like a big city, they almost all have a patch of woods next to them that you can go pitch a tent or pitch a tarp if one is so inclined. Shout out to the coyotes, by the way, for eating most of the varmints that might show up and wake me up in the middle of the night when I'm living such a way. What I did in winter was I went to Santa Barbara, California, sir. Maskless, faceless. Typically, I would go to Santa Barbara, California, or just the West Coast in general. But I do love. I actually like the Pacific Northwest in the summer. I've spent a lot of summers in the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, Santa Barbara was my favorite um, my favorite winter destination. Now, I will say, and this gets back to the pain don't hurt or Benton being attracted to difficult things. So at a certain point, I realized, okay, I've never lived outside in the winter where it's cold. So I did my last 2 winters living outside, living in the streets, like I talked about. I did my last 2 winters outdoors, but in Arkansas and Texas. So I did one winter in Austin, and I did the previous winter I did in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where the coldest temperature I faced it was 0 degrees one morning. And people said, "Oh, how could you sleep?" Well, that's the easy part. It's when you have to get out of the sleeping bag to go use the restroom. As we age, maybe we have to do that more frequently than when we were younger, right? Um, but these are skills and abilities that are practiced over time, right? It's not like day one you just know what to do, but by the end of it, I pretty well know what needs to be done. So, for example, the main thing about living outdoors in the winter is you can never really get sweaty. Because if you begin to sweat, then if you get your clothes wet, that's a complete disaster. You know. Another thing is if it's wintertime and you feel cold, probably your socks are wet. And if you're like, man, I just can't get warm, change your socks. Another thing is clean clothes are way warmer than dirty clothes. Something about the dirt blocking the pores in the fabric or something. But yeah, the major thing is like, yeah, I don't want to change my socks repeatedly on a winter day, but so it's like, okay, I'm going to live outside, and every day of the winter, I'm going to change my socks like 4 times. Or, oh, I just briskly walked for 2 hours, and then now I've arrived at my destination, but I know that I have to, if I go directly into the building, I'll start sweating because of the change in temperature. So I know I must kind of hang out outside and sort of let my body balance itself out so that when I go in the building, I won't start sweating. Same thing in the summer, by the way. Just all these little tricks that one picks up over time, right? Or you got the homeless drug addicts who they sidestep all of this by just abusing drugs, so they don't really notice that they're not living right. I typically don't hitchhike long distances, maskless, faceless. Generally, I would take the Greyhound, although occasionally I would take a flight. So, like the last time I left Seattle, for instance, I flew to Arkansas from Seattle. I've done that a couple of times. But and I figured out the trick on the Greyhound because once I took a Greyhound from San Francisco to Arkansas, and it became an endurance contest because what happened is as soon as the bus starts running behind schedule, which that happens because the bus went from San Francisco to Los Angeles. So as soon as the bus starts running behind schedule, then the driver skips all the brakes, meaning you really can never get off the bus. And just trying to sit in a seat for 48 hours or whatever it ends up being is damn near impossible. So it's not impossible, but it becomes it does become an endurance contest. So I figured out, okay, if I'm going from the West Coast to Arkansas on the Greyhound, I need to actually book like 3 separate tickets and space it out enough where I can get off the bus and go find a place to camp out for the night and then get back on the bus the next day, right? Also, for some reason it's cheaper that way, believe it or not. You can actually if you book it online, it's cheaper that way. I don't recommend the Greyhound though. Not a fan of the Greyhound in general. Not a fan. But thank you for the questions, by the way. And this is back to I am a terrible storyteller. Like I'm not a good storyteller. But I have a lot of interesting anecdotes from my life. And I've hitchhiked extensively, by the way. I've even hitchhiked not that long ago. Like within the last year, I've hitchhiked several times. And I've lived in a tent for about a week, less than a year ago, also. And I chose to in Austin. I chose to pitch a tent at night. That was when I had my first Nissan Versa, and I had plenty of money to rent a motel. I actually chose to pitch a tent. I just don't like sleeping in cars. Although I would say to O'Shea, living in a car, and he's got way more experience at it than I do. But I had a hatchback years ago. I had a '99 Hyundai Accent, a tiny little Mickey Mouse car, but I actually removed the back seats, and if I moved the front seats all the way forward, I had just enough. I don't know how tall O'Shea is. I'm 5'10", and I had just enough room that I could lay down. I could lay flat. I would put items like in the backseat floorboards, to sort of make everything flat, and I could actually stretch all the way out and sleep. But I hate sleeping in a vehicle. Otherwise, I need to be able to stretch out to sleep good. But yeah, I think I pretty much wrapped up most of the demonic oppression, the demons and demonology, the person A using person B for purchase things, going gratification. Those are a lot of the topics I like to cover. I notice we're 1 hour and 18 minutes in. I'll probably give it a minute to see what the chat comes up with as I brainstorm for an outro song, by the way. And I hope I didn't offend JFK Beta. Provo Kid, he seems to roll with the punches pretty good. JFK Beta seems like a bit of a sensitive artist type of individual. I myself am that way, although I don't necessarily present that way. Probably I'm going to take a break. I got a couple of things I need to do, in my life. And then most likely I'm going to come back and simulcast with OTW, depending on what he's got going on his panel. Some of the time, if I feel like it's better for his broadcast, I'm not necessarily going to be popping on there every day, but I do like and shout out to Drew World Order, Chalk Body Outline. He helped me so much along the way, boosted me up so much. Anytime I see if I'm able to do that for someone else, I always want to do that, if possible. Speaking of which, take a moment. Yeah, he's holding 20 over there. OTW is, so that's a step in the right direction, I would say. Always happy to see that. Although I wonder now that I'm remembering 45 from yesterday, and I know my energy levels were a little better, but now I'm wondering how much of that was because when people saw the thumbnail, I was playing the Kim Before the Storm video. because I do know that is a thing. Like, what people see in the thumbnail, and just my goofy head here, with a comment on the screen for the thumbnail is not necessarily going to bring them in. Cool Keith, Mr. Controller. I would like these. I will take these under advisement. I would like to hear them ahead of time, though. More so, just so I know what they sound like ahead of time. Hey, I'm a big poker player, O'Shea. I don't know if you know that. We could definitely talk about poker. Yep. What events have you played? I went out there one year and I was going to play just in a lower, a less expensive event, like a 1500. But I ended up getting out there. It's a long story, O'Shea, but I got out there about a week early, and then I had ex-wife number 2 with me, and she didn't really like Vegas so much, so I got a super good deal at the LVH. I got some kind of bonus, some kind of code for the World Series of Poker. So I got a crazy low price on the hotel room, but she wasn't really feeling it. And then, like, I played like a 24-hour session, and she was freaking out because I think we were sharing a phone at the time, and she didn't have any way to. I think she thought I just, like, who knows, man. I don't know what she thought, but she didn't appreciate that. So I said, well, that's probably enough Vegas for the two of us. But yeah, I love poker, man. In fact, I may after I just paid for another week here in the motel, I might be going to Tunica. I don't know if you ever played any poker in Tunica, Mississippi there, Mr. O'Shea, but I may be going out to Tunica to play a little poker. Quite possibly. Haven't quite decided yet. Not a big fan of Vegas for poker, by the way. Not a big fan. Although another problem is I play my best poker drunk. Like, I really do. I know it sounds nuts, but and I don't drink anymore. I'm not able to drink, so. And it's boring, man. It can be very boring. Although I don't even really play Hold'em. I don't really even play Texas Hold'em anymore, so. But it still can be very boring, as you know. Oh, right on, man. That's cool. That's what we need to talk about. We could bond. We could bond over the poker, dude. I love poker. Love that shit. Oh, you played the main 3 times. That's awesome, man. See, I'm very impressed by that. I would love to hear about that. And, dude, I find that super fascinating. I would love to do a live stream with you just about poker sometime if you're ever down for that. Yeah, man, that's badass. Shout out to you, sir. That's awesome. Yeah, dude, love poker. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Might go out to Tunica. Hell, I won like 800 and something last time, but again, drunk as fuck, dude. So fucking drunk. But they have Pot Limit Omaha out there. That's what I like to play. So I might go out there and play some PLO possibly. We'll see. 5Ks overseas. Balling, by the way. See, I have a newfound respect for O'Shea. Not that I lacked respect, but now it's a newfound respect. That's awesome, man. Well, I know what we're going out on then in honor of O'Shea. And by the way, this recording artist, well, actually, I probably can't play this song now that I think about it. But I do like the song, Kenny Rogers, The Gambler. Yeah, ex-wife number 2 was a big Kenny Rogers fan. I think she was just attracted to him, though. It's funny, fellas, if you ever get into a relationship with a lady, what I found is that if you just treat her completely non-judgmentally from the beginning, that she'll just share more or less all her thoughts and ideas with you on some level. So it was interesting getting to find out, like, the men that she found attractive. Like Chuck Woolery was one. I wouldn't have guessed that, right? Patrick Swayze, that's a little more of a, one you could see. But and Montel Williams, the bald black former TV show host. Yeah, she really and LL Cool J also. So you just never know, man. See, you don't learn these things by asking, O'Shea, by the way. It's by observing non-judgmentally over time. That's how you learn these things. I don't think she would have just told me, hey, whatever, name all the guys you're attracted to. I don't think I would have gotten the answers. Yeah, Kenny Rogers Roasters. Oh, dude, that reminds me of a Seinfeld episode. Poker and comedy are probably the 2 most pure things to do for a living because it's not undeniable when you're skilled at them. I agree. I will say that I attempted to play for a living at various times. Um, and in fact, at the time, I knew the proper strategies, but I didn't realize that I had compulsive gambling, which I've now, fortunately, I've overcome. But the thing is, a lot of times playing correctly, especially if you're like multi-tabling online, that shit's fucking boring. I mean, it really is, dude. It's fucking boring, man. And like, I could go to some local, because there's poker rooms all over this country. I could go play some fucking Texas Hold'em and probably eke out a living. But man, the type of scumbags that frequent, uh, card rooms, and I like to go to sleep early at night. So it's like now I'm playing in the daytime with these just total degenerates, right? Some of the worst people to be around. I'm just sitting there next to them all day, and then it's fucking boring. If you actually play, the way you're supposed to play, it's fucking boring. I'm one of those guys that I used to like to get drunk, not look at my cards and just play 1-2 no limit. But like, it'd be me and a table of 8 tight players, like the tightest players you've ever seen. And I'm just like open raising to 25 every hand, like without looking at my cards type of thing. And then making it 100. Then everybody, a couple of callers, they check to me, I make it 100 on the flop. And they don't even know what my cards are. Which, by the way, they're playing so poorly. Like, this is actually, like, it's mathematically, it's a terrible strategy, but it's fun, number one. And number two, you can actually win that way in the short term, because these bozos don't know how to properly adapt to that strategy. Now, this was years ago, by the way. I think nowadays people have become a little more sophisticated. I can remember bluffing all in against a really good player, one of the few really good local players. This was when Hot Springs, Arkansas had poker. It was those electronic machines, which sucks. But dude, I was so drunk. I remember bluffing all in on the river. Couldn't remember the previous action. So like, I'm sitting there like waiting to see if this guy's going to call or not, and like honestly couldn't remember the previous action. And the only reason he even called is because he rivered 2 pair, or he would have. I don't think I had anything. That's the only reason he even called. So yeah, I don't find poker to be interesting anymore. But yeah, I agree. The skill always wins in the end. But the big money gets the little money in poker, as you may know, Mr. O'Shea. If one is not properly rolled, right? The big money always gets the little money. Same thing with crypto. The big money gets the little money. That's just how it goes. And I would say trading in general. The big money gets the little money. Yeah. Well, and the Asians culturally, like they love pocket eights, infinity, double infinity. Yeah, there's certain hands that they like that the people who aren't familiar with Asian cultures don't necessarily understand. I like playing with Asians though. The action. I need action players, man. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to fucking not look at my cards. Although I will tell you a trick about not looking at your cards is once the other players figure out that you're not looking some of the time, you have to pretend to look. Because last time I played, a guy caught me. He said, "Yeah, the only reason I called is because I saw you didn't look at your cards." I was like, "Fuck!" I was so drunk, I forgot to fake looking at my cards. Yeah. Now I don't understand craps. I'm kind of a Dumbo. I actually don't understand craps, and I think my paralysis by analysis holds me back. It's like I need to learn everything about craps. I really don't understand it. Yep, the big bank takes the little bank. That's right. But PLO, I noticed the only time I've ever played it live was in Tunica, and these people, O'Shea, you would not believe the glaring errors these bozos were making. It was astonishing. Like I just ran over the table, and I got unlucky in the 3 biggest pots I played, or I would have won like $3,000, like for sure. Like I didn't even, my luck wasn't even that good. I didn't even run that good, and won like 800. Oh, it's crazy. Terrible, terrible players. I was astonished. And believe me, I'm no expert, but I understand the basics of the game. Good Lord. I know how to avoid making glaring errors. Insanity. But I didn't mean to get off on a poker rant. So let's land this plane, if we may. I actually ran O'Shea off talking about poker. He does. It's my arrogance. He just something about my arrogance, dude. You're probably better than. Oh, okay, good. He's still here. But say you're probably way better at poker than me. By the way, I just assume that you are, but yeah, I'm arrogant. But yeah, good. He didn't. I didn't run him off. Yeah, I agree, man. Casinos and poker rooms attract a demonic element. Yeah, it is talked about in Eastern thought, Hinduism, the Kali Yuga that is ending now, and the worst Yuga or age, Iron Age, and casinos are mentioned. That's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that as well. See, I come across as a know-it-all, but I know almost nothing about what you just said as far as tying it in with gambling. Yeah, yeah, casinos are boomer soul traps. Well, and the thing with me in poker, I actually started winning because I went into truck driving, and then now I had enough disposable income. As soon as I started viewing it as pure recreation, then I guess I didn't put as much pressure on myself, and I started winning. Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly. But I'm toying with the idea, since I'm not broke yet, and I know I can go drive a truck if I get broke. I'm thinking about going to Tunica, quite possibly. There's disagreement of when Kali Yuga ends. Yeah, I need to look into this more. I don't know enough about it. Just looking through my YouTube music here. Not feeling real inspired at the moment. Is that irony? Given the title of the live stream. Oh, here we go. This will work. This will work. I don't know. I played entire albums in the past, but that was when I was still on the gas station cannabinoids, gas station synthetic cannabinoids. So we may not get through this whole entire album. The world is a casino, indeed. Indeed, musical is a secret. Which is why there is demon nature. Which is why where I think I know what you're trying to say, Star Daddy. Yeah, meth is demonic, indeed, indeed. Yeah, I can tell my brain's not working that well today. I certainly have some cognitive issues related to my illness. So I was way sharper yesterday. So bear with me. Thank you for your patience. Shout out to the chat. Good to see everybody. Um, Certainly grateful for all of your contributions, and however, in any way you may have chosen to let that happen. Hey, O'Shea, I will say this: the largest pot I ever lost in a live poker game was to the Luther from the TV show Coach, Dick Van Dyke's brother, Jerry Van Dyke. He retired to Hot Springs, Arkansas. Used to play a lot of poker with him. And listening. Bye.
This I call myself home. These are all my friends. That beyond the shoreline, that is where it ends. High and dry are same size the solid, tasted on
high and dry, high and dry. Yes, I call myself home. These are all my friends. That beyond the shoreline, that is where it ends. High and dry, high and dry. Blue skies come down on me, white clouds now in view, and rain for the days you know, and rain for the nights you know. Blue skies come down on me. Careful what you say. You said that yesterday. Tell me something new. It's always, always you. Blue skies come down on me. Gray clouds far away, and sorted for days on days, and sorted 6 weeks or so. You know, blue skies come down on me. Careful what you say. Said that yesterday. Tell me something new. It's always always ocean blue. Blue skies come down on me. White clouds now in view. And you should see the view. And you should see the view, you know. Blue skies, blue skies, blue skies. There's a time when life was easy. My heart did soar for what the future store, and life it pleased me. But it's all gone now, it's all gone now, gone away now. It's all gone now, it's all gone now, gone away now. Far away. Far away. My life is changed, or have I rearranged what was my life? What once brought pride now seems oh so tried, and I'm scared. Catastrophe and calamity are the norm now. The past seems like some old forgotten dream. Far away. But when I look into your eyes, I forget myself and my signs. I'm alone with you on the sea, on a crystal sea. There's a time when life was easy. My heart did soar for what the future store in life. But it's all gone now, it's all gone now.